Welcome into another episode of The Install with Greg Cosell. Week 13 is on our doorstep, and certainly a lot of interesting games coming out of this weekend. A lot more to go with teams jockeying for playoff position. But Greg, I don't see the Tennessee Titans getting manhandled very often. I certainly did it on Sunday at Nissan Stadium against the Cincinnati team, man.
Well, they couldn't run the ball. That was their main issue. You saw that pretty early on. Um, they're a team that really likes to run out of 12 and 13 personnel. You know that. They like to play out of multiple tight end sets. Derrick Henry has the most rushes in the NFL out of multiple tight end sets by a wide margin. And for the most part, they've been very successful doing that. He's averaging 5 yards a carry, Buck, out of 12 and 13 personnel sets. So that's kind of who they are. But in this particular game, they could not run the ball. I thought that obviously their O-line struggled at the point of attack. I thought that the linebackers for the Bengals did a really good job of hitting gaps. They just really shut down the run game. Normally, running well and not running well and being stopped, there's not a ton of mystery to that, Buck. You see guys getting blocked, or you see guys not being able to hold their blocks, or you see players who can't be blocked based on the defensive front. There's always an extra guy. Sometimes it works out that way. So there's not a lot of mystery as to why teams don't run the ball. Normally you get physically handled at the line of scrimmage.
No, certainly. And we've seen teams stop the Titans rushing attack before, Greg. Honestly, it was an impressive defensive performance from Cincinnati, I thought, throughout the course of the game. And obviously we'll talk about what their offense did as well. DJ Reader, he is just a human tank.
Yeah, he was a factor in this game.
He played a huge role. But honestly, Greg, the more impressive thing that Cincinnati did to me is it's rare to stop the Titans once they get inside of 20 yards, and they went 0 for 3 in the red zone this week.
Yeah, and again, I can't remember all the plays,
Sure.
but look, the Titans are a team, as we know, overall, that are not an explosive type offense. They choose to play a lot out of multiple tight end sets. In an odd way, they really don't ask Ryan Tannehill to do a lot. So it's hard to develop a consistent passing game when you don't ask your quarterback to do too much, which is an interesting question. I certainly don't have the answer to that. He's a veteran quarterback. We know that 3 years ago, they averaged 30 points a game. So they've had success being able to score a lot of points and making plays in the pass game. Now, obviously, they don't have the quality of receiver in an A.J. Brown. And even Davis. Davis might not have become Corey Davis, that is, might not have become what a number 5 pick in a draft is supposed to become, but he's a quality NFL wideout. And they had 2 of those guys. Obviously they don't have that now. Maybe Burks, after 6 games or 7 games, you start to think, okay, he could become that guy, but he's certainly not there yet, nor would you expect him to be. And Woods is a solid complement. Woods is not the driving force of a pass game. He's a really good football player, but he's a complement. Don't forget what he played with the Rams. That's where his being a really good football player could shine, because they had other really good football players. So, at this point, their pass game is somewhat limited. They know that, and they have to play a certain way. And when that way doesn't quite function as it can and it has in the past, then they get sort of stuck in the mud just a little bit.
Yeah, and certainly that's what happened throughout the course of this game. Who knows if they would have been able to make a difference after that penalty that ended the game, that the Bengals didn't necessarily need that field goal. But still, to that point, they had not.
Right, and again, you don't want to say this was a Titans kind of game because they couldn't run the ball, but these are often the kinds of games they play, as you know.
Yes.
And games like that very often come down to the fourth quarter, in which a play or two can determine the outcome. But I will say this, the one thing, and we'll get into the matchup this week because it's a very intriguing one in many ways. But the one thing you can say about the Titans, and I know they're having some offensive line issues. They've had to move people around. It's tough to play with a 275-pound center. Radens is just okay.
Mm-hmm.
So they've had issues. Obviously, they're still playing, with Daly at left tackle, who's had ups and downs, a rookie right tackle who for the most part has been better than not, but he's still a rookie right tackle. So they've had their concerns along the O-line, which has made a lot of what they do on offense week to week. But they are a heavyweight team, Buck. When you play the Titans, and it starts with their defense, but it permeates the team, and it's the Mike Vrabel approach. They're a heavyweight team. They're physical. They're competitive. They're not easy to play against.
Yeah.
So even though they have some offensive concerns that can crop up any given week, it's not. My guess is it's no fun playing against the Titans. They are a heavyweight team in terms of what they bring to the table with physicality, toughness, and competitiveness.
No, that's certainly been their brand under Mike. It was interesting to watch this Cincinnati offense go at the Titans defense though, Greg, because I thought they came in with a really great plan. The ball got out quickly. They were running up the middle in ways that we typically don't see teams try to run on the Titans like that, and it worked to their benefit all day.
Yeah, their run game wasn't great, but you're right. It wasn't as if it got totally shut down.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't as if they dominated the game running the football, but your initial point was terrific because one thing I typed, because as you know, I take copious notes when I watch all these games. I said what immediately stood out with the Bengals pass game was the emphasis on quick game timing and rhythm throws by Burrow. Bengals did not want the Titans pass rush to be a determining factor in the game. And they were able to, for the most part, accomplish that objective. Yeah. He was sacked twice. One was, I can't remember both, but I think one was not necessarily a function of their O-line being dominated. So it was a good plan. It was a smart plan. And look, they didn't score a ton of points. It wasn't like they were going up and down the field. They had to play this game to sort of maximize staying ahead of the sticks. It's tough to make big plays against the Titans D. They made a couple. They were one-on-ones, which the Bengals are very, very good at. That's kind of the way they play. I mean, when they get one-on-one outside the numbers, Burrow throws the ball. And it doesn't matter that it's not Jamar Chase. He throws the ball. T. Higgins would be a number one on many teams in this league. Shoot, the Titans would be thrilled to have T.
They would kill for T. Higgins.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I wasn't saying that to be sarcastic. I was just trying to make the point that, Titans, that Burrow has always been aggressive since he's come in this league, throwing to one-on-ones outside the numbers. Those throws are staples of the Bengals passing game. And we saw them do that. He hit Irwin on that critical 16-yarder. Then he hit Higgins down to the 1-yard line. Then he hit Higgins for 29 yards on 2nd and 10 with 3 minutes remaining in the game. The stop and go versus Fulton in cover 1. So when Burrow feels he can throw vertical routes outside the numbers based on coverage, he will do that.
Well, and I was listening to, I was watching NFL Live yesterday, Greg, and listening to Dan Orlovsky break down Joe Burrow, and he talked about the difference between accuracy and ball placement and how good Joe Burrow is at ball placement.
Look, I'm not saying Orlovsky got that from me because, Orlovsky's a smart guy and I know Dan well. But about 5-6 years ago, in my notes and in just the way I talk about quarterbacks, I changed my talk from saying accuracy to ball placement because those are two different things. And it's ball placement that's absolutely critical. I mean, you can go back to the Thursday game when Josh Allen made that ridiculous throw to get them into field goal range at the end. I'm sure you've seen that play.
Yeah. Because
Diggs got hit the second he caught the ball, that ball had to be literally stuck between the 1 and the 4. If it was 6 inches further outside where Diggs had to just use his hands to catch it, the ball would have been knocked away because he got hit the second that he caught it. Yeah. So ball placement is the key. Ball placement, ball location, those are more key phrases than accuracy. And a very quick story, Ron Jaworski, who is one of my best friends, have worked with him since 1990. We don't work together now anymore, but he told me a great story when he was with the Rams and Chuck Knox was the coach. And George was early in his career and they were working on things and he was throwing to a great old receiver named Harold Jackson. I don't know if you know that name. And Chuck Knox kept saying to him, "Where are you throwing it to?" And George would say, "To Harold." And he'd say, "No, where are you throwing it to?" George would say, "To Harold." And this kept going back and forth until finally Knox told him, no, you're not throwing it to Harold. You've got to pick a spot on Harold to throw the ball based on the route and the coverage.
Yeah.
So you're not just throwing to a guy, you're throwing to a spot.
Yeah. And Burrow absolutely kills people that way. So what you're saying is Dan watches the NFL matchup show. That's what I took.
Well, I hope he does, because he was in our broadcast boot camp a few years ago, and I've been an instructor in it for every year. So maybe, who knows? He's on ESPN. He's a pretty smart guy. So I'm not saying that I've taught Dan Orlovsky football. Believe me.
No, well, I'm grateful for you, Greg, because you do teach me football on a regular basis, which I'm always appreciative of. The matchup this weekend, as you mentioned, it's going to be a fun one. The Eagles are rolling right now, literally running through the Packers on Sunday Night Football in this last game. Jalen Hurts is such a threat on the ground and was so again. This game, I guess that's the place to start, that the Eagles offense and what they're able to do and how versatile they are at times and what kind of threat that poses.
Yeah, they're a very difficult offense to defend, and Hurts is a major part of that, particularly with the run game, because you have to account for Hurts. So he becomes a factor in the run game, number one. And number two, he's also a factor when he drops back to pass. Look, I have not had this conversation with Eagles coaches. Maybe it's the kind of thing I'll find out after the season. But it would not surprise me if there are times when he drops back where they tell him, if you see space, just run.
Yeah.
Because there are times he does not even plant his back foot, as you're obviously told to do as a quarterback when you're dropping back. And he just takes off because he sees space. Or let's say it's man coverage, which it'll be interesting to see. That's an intriguing matchup point in this game, because the Titans out of dime on third down play a good percentage of man coverage. That's really their predominant third down coverage out of dime, 6 DBs. But you have a little concern when it's Hurts, because if he sees man and he sees space, he's going to take off.
Yeah.
And he's a big man who can run, who's tough to bring down. Now, this also impacts, by the way, your pass rush, because a third down pass rush, you can't just, to use the cliched expression, you can't just pin your ears back and go after the quarterback, because you have to stay in lanes. You have to try to prevent him from getting into running lanes to scramble, because there is nothing worse for a defense than if it's 3rd and 11, where you feel like, hey, that's our game plan every week to get the offense into 3rd and long, and Jalen Hurts is going to run for 24 yards.
Yeah.
So you have to change. I'm curious. We don't know this till they play, and obviously Mike Vrabel's not going to make a public announcement, but I'd be very curious to see if they play less man on third down out of dime with more zone, so they can have eyes on Hurts.
You'd have to think that'd be it will obviously be a consideration, but more so, Greg, just because we've seen Burrow take advantage of that, and Mahomes a couple of weeks ago. Now, those guys are
Burrow is sneaky athletic. Burrow's not Hurts, but Burrow is sneaky athletic.
Right. And so you saw instances where those quarterbacks took advantage of exactly what you're talking about when they saw the opportunity to have space. Obviously, Jalen Hurts is a different level of that.
Right, but it's a major tactical factor in this game. And even the thing about the Eagles is, Hurts, they called a quarterback draw on 3rd and 6. I mean, other than maybe Lamar, and I guess you might see that every once in a great while with Josh Allen. They don't normally call a design run unless it's like 3rd and 2. But when do you really see designed quarterback runs on 3rd and 6?
Not in the NFL.
No.
Not in the NFL like that.
So, I mean,
unless you've got a special player like they obviously do.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's, it was 3rd and 6 on their first possession. He ran for 28 yards.
I guess they like the success rate on that, huh?
That's it's a big fact. And then the other thing to keep in mind is they are really good. Let's step back for a moment.
Sure.
They've got arguably the best offensive line in the NFL. Okay, we can't lose sight of that. That's where the heavyweight matchup comes into this game. People should watch the trenches a little bit in this game. That's going to be fun if you like that. If you're a person that likes, physical play inside with O-line and D-line, you've got a nasty D-line with the Titans, and you've got arguably the best O-line in the game with the Eagles, and with the exception of Kelsey, who's not a big center, everybody else on that front is a big freaking dude. Yeah. So, this is a heavyweight battle. Then the other thing about the Eagles is they've got great skill players. So this is a totally complete offense. I mean, you guys know about A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith is really good. Obviously, Goddard is out, but they're starting to use Quez Watkins more, and Quez Watkins has 4.3 speed, so you got to be careful about that.
Yeah, no, and their passing game, Greg, how much have you seen that develop throughout the course of the season, coming from where obviously last year the emphasis was on how well they could run the ball. They took advantage of it. They made a postseason push that way. But the development of the passing game with Hurts specifically, and just how comfortable and confident he looks in the system, I think that's been the biggest thing for me to watch their progression that way.
I would say this though, and this is no knock on Hurts, but they know what they have with their offense and how
Sure.
complete it is and how difficult it is to defend. So their passing game is efficient, and Hurts executes it at a very high level. But their passing game is not, let's say, as detailed as some others in the league. But it doesn't have to be. I mean, think about this. They scored 5 touchdowns this week, and Hurts only had 153 yards passing.
Right.
That usually doesn't happen in the league. This was like a college game. They had 49 rushes, including the 5 Hurts scrambles, for 363 yards. That's like college.
Yeah, it was crazy to watch that. The defensive side of the ball, the Eagles, on as far as their run defense goes, it was kind of shaky as the year started off. They made a couple of signings in Ndamukong Suh at the end of his career and bringing in some depth on the defensive line. What should people make of this Eagles defense right now since they've made those personnel?
Well, I'll tell you what you're going to get because of the 12 and 13 personnel. The Eagles are going to play a 5-man front with a nose shade. It'll be Linville Joseph, and unless Jordan Davis plays, I know the window has opened for him to practice.
Yeah.
There's no one's going to know that. We're talking on Wednesday. We're not going to know that, I bet, till Saturday or even Sunday before the game, and unless they announce he's not playing. But if there's no announcement, we're not going to know that probably until the inactives come out.
Yeah.
So the point is, the bottom line is they play a 5-man base front, and they'll play a 5-2, which means they'll have 2 stack backers, White and TJ Edwards, who's played extremely well and plays with a great feel for formations, for offensive line movement. The term that you often used is key and diagnose. TJ Edwards has been outstanding at that this year. So that's what they're going to get. So when the Titans line up in their base personnel 12-13, they're going to get that 5-man front. And the issue is going to be, is Ben Jones, has he cleared?
No, he still hasn't cleared, but he did practice today.
Well, even if he clears, now I think he's a good center, but he's also not a big center.
Right.
So the big issue is going to be how they think they have to deal with Joseph or Davis. Both guys are 320 plus, 325 plus. So, that is where it starts, whether it's Jones or Brewer again. If it's Brewer, they're going to have to figure some things out with their blocking schemes because Brewer can't handle those guys one-on-one, which they'll know. So I'm not saying anything that, that's earth-shattering here, but it will impact how they choose to block.
No, and certainly it was evident in this past Sunday's game, as you mentioned, with Brewer and Radens. I don't know how much CJ Gardner-Johnson missing this game is going to impact what their secondary is right now, Greg. But obviously he's been very much around the ball so far this season, trying to create turnovers. What do we know about their secondary at this point based on his absence?
Overall, their secondary has been really, really good. I mean, they've got 2 really good corners. The other safety, Marcus Epps, is a very good player. No one talks about him nationally because the Eagles have so many good players, but Marcus Epps has played extremely well. Reed Blankenship was the player who came in and replaced Gardner-Johnson. I would assume he'd be the starter. He's a 5-year starter out of college, was undrafted. He played well in this game when he came in and played. Now, again, I'm not going to sit here and say he's a great safety because we don't know that. The guy, it was a small sample size, but he played well. It's interesting that he was the guy who came in and not Kayvon Wallace. So think about that. That means they see Blankenship as the better player. So he's going to play. And again, it's hard to know whether that's someone that the Titans feel, hey, we can design a couple things where we want to see how he plays. He also made a great interception last week, to be honest with you, where he actually, I don't want to say he baited Rodgers, but it was a well-disguised concept, and he executed at a really high level. So my guess is as a 5-year college starter, he probably has some savvy and smarts to him.
Yeah, no, I can't. I've never done a game at Philly before. I'm looking forward to it, and certainly this game certainly projects to
Well, the
deliver.
Philly fans, as you might know, are not a quiet bunch.
Why should they be this year more than any, Greg? They
Right,
got a
right,
pretty
right,
good thing
right,
going.
right, right. I would imagine the link will be a little loud.
I certainly hope so. It'll be a fun one. This past week, Greg, before we talk about some games that I'm sure are on the matchup show, the upset of the Ravens by the Jags and the
Yeah,
way that Trevor Lawrence looked in that game, I wanted to touch on quickly because he did throw an interceptable pass late. He lost a fumble that they did recover, or
right.
rather he fumbled and they recovered. But I thought for the most part it was really good to see Trevor Lawrence, as we've talked about, ebb and flow throughout the course of this season, but really looks like he's building on stuff.
Yeah, I would say that what stood out immediately watching Lawrence, and he's done this at times throughout the year, and then other times he's reverted back. But he's played well in the last 3 weeks. What stood out immediately on this tape was he was more compact in his drop and set and delivery, something that he needs to do, with consistency all the time. But when he does it, he looks like a different player, a better player. In addition, he was really decisive in his reads. He turned it loose within timing and structure of the route concepts relative to the coverage. I mean, he really looked extremely efficient. And I thought Peterson and his staff did an excellent job with the route concepts and combinations, defining things for Lawrence. It helped him play with rhythm and be decisive. And he definitely looked really good. And as I said, over the last 3 weeks, he's clearly trending in the right direction. I thought that early in the season, and then he hit some bumps in the road. He obviously made some big time throws in the fourth quarter. I hope he continues to play this way. I mean, hey, the league's better when young quarterbacks play well. I hope, just like Tua's playing at a really high level. So I hope these guys continue to play well.
And you mentioned the Dolphins. I mean, there's good games all over the board this week, Greg. The
Ah,
Dolphins at Niners is, and
yeah.
I assume that's in the show this week.
No, that's not really an important game. We're going to leave that out. No, of
Well,
course that's in the
listen,
show.
if you picked a week to do that, this would be the week because there's good games all over the place.
Yeah, no, Tua is, I mean, he's a fun watch. He has exceptionally quick feet on his drop and set in the pocket. His delivery's compact. Those traits make him a perfect fit in the Mike McDaniel offense because that focuses the quick rhythm passing game off so many concepts, so many, multiple concepts that make it really difficult for defenses. And the reality is no one can press Hill and Waddle.
Yeah.
So they get free access off the ball, and that quick rhythm passing game is just exceptionally hard to defend.
Yeah. And certainly that defense is no joke in San Francisco as they've
No, so that's going to be interesting. Although I got to tell you, I think the Niners are going to have to score this week. I mean, obviously they had 38 2 weeks ago. This week was a tough week offensively. They couldn't get the run game going, and Garoppolo had one of those games. He was fortunate that the defense was able to bail him out. So I would expect Garoppolo to play better this week.
do we know McCaffrey's availability? I haven't checked in on that this week, but
Why
I
is
know
he hurt?
I thought he was dealing with a knee thing recently, but
Well, he only had 7 carries last week, but I know Elijah Mitchell now is hurt and out again. So we're going to find out.
right, and they just traded Jeff Wilson to the Dolphins. So as
Right.
far as the depth
Down the
goes,
stretch, they did run Jordan Mason, so McCaffrey did not play down the stretch, but they were also winning. Once you got to the middle of the fourth quarter, it was a 2-score game, so they probably didn't feel they needed to push McCaffrey if he's nursing any kind of injury.
maybe
But I haven't
so.
heard anything today, Wednesday. Again, they're on the West Coast, but you could be right. I guess we'll find out in the next day or two.
Very early in the week. Obviously, the Chiefs at the Bengals is going to be a fun one.
Yeah.
I mean, just how many of them there are, Greg, including the Titans game. Like the Commanders at Giants is a great game.
That's a big game. That's in our show, Jets Vikings.
Yeah, Jets Vikings. I mean, they're all over the place. It was a little bit of a down week where Titans and Bengals felt like the best one on the board, but I feel like week 13 is really
Well,
good.
just one quick point about the Chiefs that people might not be aware of. And I started noticing this about a month ago watching tape. So I looked up the numbers, obviously, because tape usually brings me to stats. I let the tape kind of dictate, and then then I'll check the stats. They, over the last month, have evolved into playing a ton out of 12 and 13 personnel.
Yes.
Doesn't mean that they don't throw the ball, but they play a ton with 2 and 3 tight ends. Last week against the Chargers, it was almost 50%. This past week against the Rams, it was over 50%. So they are playing with multiple tight ends, which probably a lot of people would be surprised to hear, given Mahomes spread the ball around. It's not as if they're stopping throwing it, but they're just doing it differently.
Well, but it makes sense for them in particular because the tight ends are such a matchup problem. They can operate so much of their offense out of 12 and 13.
They can, because Kelsey and Fortson was a wide receiver in college, smaller school guy, but he was a wide receiver. So the question for a defense, the first question is, do we play base or do we have to play some kind of sub? Because essentially Kelsey and Fortson are kind of like wide receivers.
Yeah, no, and I don't believe Fortson played against the Titans, which is why I think that is kind of when that trend started.
But he's been playing a lot the last number of weeks.
Yeah, well, certainly this is it's always a good reason to go check out the NFL matchup show. But ESPN, you can catch it early Saturday and Sunday morning. You can catch it on ESPN Plus, set your DVR, and get it on demand as you like. Greg and the crew do a fantastic job as always, and I know they're going to kill it this week with so many good games on the board. Greg, appreciate it, and hopefully I'll see you in Philly this weekend.
I'm looking forward to it, Buck. Yeah, let me know.